Welcome back to some new malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. The first story is called Improving Metrics. Many years ago, I was working for a large multinational information technology service company, in a team helping to service one of the company's largest local clients. As one of the team's senior members, I took it upon myself to tackle the more challenging cases assigned to the group. Due to their complexity and the fact that it sometimes took a while for these to be completed, the number of cases I typically completed per week was lower than many of the others on the team. One day, my new manager, who I'll call Bob, called me into his office. He asked me why my numbers were lower than the rest of my team, 30 versus the typical 100 cases per week. I explained my approach, but this wasn't good enough for him, and he demanded that I improve my metrics. So I gave Bob what he asked for. By the end of the following week, I had absolutely smashed everyone else's numbers, completing over 300 cases, or more than 3 times anyone else on the team. When Bob saw my metrics at the end of the week, his jaw literally dropped. He was ecstatic and seriously impressed. "How did you achieve such massive throughput?" he asked with amazement in his voice. So I told him my dirty little secret. Over the week, I had cherry-picked all of the easiest, quickest cases I could find from the group queue in order to improve my metrics. He was not a happy camper, but I had proved my point. Numbers don't always tell the whole story. After that, I went back to taking on the difficult cases, and Bob never complained about my metrics again. The next story is called Contract Requirements. This story came from an IT coworker who previously worked at a recently expanded data center and was indirectly involved with the legal mess. The data center's company determined that a redundant internet connection was needed and reached out to a few internet service providers with a list of the data center's requirements. One of the service providers underbid everyone else by far. The coworker expressed concerns over that, but management didn't care because the service provider assured them that they would meet all of the requirements. Some long time passed and they heard nothing further from the service provider after the contract was signed. Strange. As the date of the service start approached, the service provider was asked when they were going to visit the data center for a site survey to start their connection. The service provider requested specifications of the data center's connection infrastructure to the internet. Data centers said that they had no redundant fiber connections and they were expecting the service provider to do the installation work. The email response from the service provider included new people in the email chain. Turns out the requirement didn't specifically state that the service provider had to build the cable infrastructure to connect the data center. The service provider's legal team insisted that the contract only required the service provider to allow the data center to access the internet. And the service provider assumed the data center already had the physical infrastructure in place for the tap to be turned on. When the company pushed to have the contract cancelled, the service provider's legal team insisted that the company had already agreed to a 1-year contract. So they would have to pay in full, even if they couldn't use the internet due to the lack of cables. The outcome of the hostile closed-door negotiations was that the company backed out of the contract by paying the service provider a sum of money that was equivalent to a few months of service and restart the bidding. This time, the requirements were significantly rewritten. When the same service provider put their offer in again, for some reason it was rejected immediately. The last story is called Notified Every Time. Years ago, I ran the daily operations of a mid-size IT company. Large enterprise, government, medical, and other facilities would outsource the IT to the team I ran. We had departments that supported us with finance and sales, but all other operations fell under my management. I answered to the owner of the company, who was great when we started off together, but over time grew very resentful and abusive. Long ago, he worked in IT, but nowadays his skills were outdated and his knowledge was on par with a Tier 1 technician. But if he actually tried to do the job, then the actual Tier 1s would have easily outperformed him. I oversaw a few dozen technicians and we managed IT for thousands of companies, with each technician closing approximately 150 tickets a day, empowered by automation and their own knowledge. Since these companies and government entities were responsible for very important things, we were routinely receiving tickets that were urgent. In fact, we had a system clearly defined that dictated exactly what criteria constituted an emergency versus an urgency. Even with all that in place, half-hour tickets would meet the criteria of being an emergency. Things as simple as a camera not working could mean not seeing criminals waiting on the other side of a door, for example. My team lived every day fully immersed in emergency, to the point where we were all dead inside. We would rise to the responsibility and treat it appropriately, but when everything is an emergency, nothing is an emergency. We regularly heard compliments about how cool-headed and calm we were able to respond to emergencies. This was always funny to us, because internally we knew it was because we stopped caring years ago, but still knew how to be professional. Over time, feedback from my coworkers regarding things said behind my back and to my face, I can only assume the owner felt threatened by me, and the radio team looked to me to lead. He would give them bad instructions or orders they knew would go against something standard, and they would look to me to confirm. He accused me of a lot of horrible things, got really abusive, and would routinely try to tear me down in front of everyone. I essentially lived on call 24/7, and would rely on technicians being skilled enough to not escalate to me after hours. But it was unavoidable. It helped me keep clients happy by choosing options I knew they would want from my experience with their managers. Sometimes I would be unavailable when they would try to call, and as an alternative, if they could not reach a senior engineer on our team, they would finally surrender and call the owner. They didn't want to be responsible for bad decisions, and I don't blame them. Calling the owner gave them some cover. Every time this would happen, the owner would always drastically exaggerate the urgency of the situation and treat it like it was the biggest case we had in months. It was always all hands on decks needed to support him in this crisis that he was creating, and so more technicians would get involved and drastically more hours invested than necessary. Then he would inevitably pat himself on the back for how great he is in solving this massive emergency. Use it to highlight why he is around and how the big problems go to him. Then circle back to rip me apart in front of everyone once we were all back in the office to show how I'm not managing my responsibilities and how much better he is than myself. Anyways, not to get too boring and rant too much, he ripped me in front of everyone. Took me behind closed doors to yell at me how this one particular emergency could have cost us so much money, cost us the customer, and it's all my fault. I'm tired of him, so I tell him how it could have been resolved compared to how he resolved it. And that he is so unaware of daily operations he has no idea how insignificant this issue was by comparison. He assures me he is aware of every detail going on in this company at all times. He is not. And that if emergencies are happening, then he needs to be notified of them. I tell him he's underestimating how many emergencies happen, and he's fuming that I'm not taking it. He makes a mistake and demands yelling, "From now on, I want to be notified about every single critical issue." I asked him if he is fine with me notifying him by mail. He screams back, "Do whatever the heck you want. I want to be notified about every single critical issue from now on." So I promise him I will absolutely notify him and keep him informed about everything from here forward. He's the boss. The boss is old and operates slowly through his day using email. He never goes into the ticket system and doesn't abide by any of the policies he screams at people for not following. In our ticket system, the tickets assigned to him are like entering a graveyard of endless promises that never happen and constant lies about not seeing that email. It takes me all of 2 minutes to set up a rule that our system automatically sends him an email absolutely anytime a ticket is marked critical, even if it's done incorrectly and someone more senior corrects it back to a lower status. Too late. The email is already sent. Immediately he gets hundreds of emails for his own existing tickets, then thousands more follow for all the other tickets. His inbox is so out of control that his lies about not seeing that email are suddenly made real. Making the situation even funnier, he was meeting with a client at their office when the tones on his phone started going off every time he received an email. He started texting me not even a half hour after the automated rule's creation, asking me to turn it off, explaining how it's impacting his meeting. I ignored his text and let the rule run long enough that I was sure his inbox was royally messed up and he would have to ask me in person to turn it off. Instead of apologizing, he told me to turn the notifications off in person, but also made it clear that I needed to get to work to get things under control. Clearly, it was my bad leadership causing there to even be so many emergencies in the first place. If these are all an emergency, then why are technicians going home at the end of the day, and so on. A few weeks after this, I had a new job offer that I accepted. I didn't even give him notice when I quit. I walked in on Monday morning and grabbed 2 things off my desk, went find him and handed him the keys to the building, and looked him in the eyes. I told him, "You know, you're a real piece of work." He was fuming but didn't say a word as I walked out of the door. Within a year of me leaving, his company quickly began to fail. Last I saw, he only has 3 people working for him now, and he had to sell the building they owned and move into a much older, more shabby one in a different part of town. Thanks for watching the video to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. And if you have time, watch another one of my videos. And now, I hope you have a great day. See you soon. Bye bye.